Welcome, everyone. Shiyo, as we like to say, as hello in Cherokee. We learned on our second adventure session with Cherokee Elder Gil Jackson. We're so excited to offer this adventure series geared for young people, engaging for all ages. I'm Julie Judkins. I'm Director of Education and Outreach here at the Appalachian Trail Conservancy. And with my amazing colleagues on the line, Chloe, Alyssa, Catherine, we've pivoted our regular education workshops for teachers and taken a virtual hike up the trail. We started in Georgia with the science and habitats of rattlesnakes and are headed north to Maine, exploring all different subjects connected to the trail in each state with local educators and partners, looking at flora, fauna, history, and culture. This week's hike, we're in Connecticut, and we'll be learning about all the birds of prey. These sessions are a resource for educators, for students, parents and guardians, and anyone interested in learning more about these topics. Please check out the ones you may have missed on our YouTube channel, which can be found on the Adventure landing page. A wee bit about the Appalachian Trail. Many of you know that the Appalachian Trail is a unit of our national park system and a hiking trail that goes through 14 states from Georgia to Maine, built by volunteers and is taken care of by over 6,000 volunteers still today. Our organization, the Appalachian Trail Conservancy, we're a nonprofit that works with hundreds of partners like the National Park Service or National Forest Service and all the volunteers to make sure it's an experience that everyone can enjoy and learn from. We're so excited to have speakers through this adventure series tell us more about the different aspects of the trail, from hiking and history, recreation to plants and animals, and the powerful healing that can come from walking. So let's find out more about the incredible birds of prey found along the Appalachian Trail, led by Matt Hoyt and Jim Hunter. At a young age, Matt fell in love with nature and never turned back. That love stemming from catching birds, amphibians, reptiles, and insects in his neighborhood. It led him to study wildlife ecology at the University of Maine, where he worked with a variety of species, including birds of prey. After bouncing around the country post-school and working on various wildlife projects, he finally returned to his home state of Connecticut and took a position with the Audubon Society, developing their live animal displays and training their animal ambassadors for education programs. This job turned out to be more teaching than anticipated, and where the move to education and trip leading take hold, leading to my current position as a science teacher at Wilton High School, and leading trips as a contract guide when the opportunity presents itself. When not in a classroom or with his family, you can find Matt out in the wild spaces of Connecticut, hiking, photography, birding, sketching, teaching, or just simply observing and enjoying the wonders of Connecticut habitat. Similarly, from a young age, Jim Hunter spent most of his time in nature fishing, catching dragonflies, butterflies, amphibians, and anything else he could find while growing up in Ohio. In middle school, he started to volunteer at a nature center in Westport, Connecticut, where he continued his enthusiasm for nature and natural history through high school. He then worked as a nursery school teacher and a naturalist before attending Southern Connecticut State University, where he got his degree in biology with a focus in natural history and ornithology. He's been teaching biology and AP environmental science now at Wilton High School for the last 19 years. He's also done research all over in South Africa and Australia, as well as across the United States. In his free time, Jim can be found outside birding, hiking, doing nature photography all over Connecticut. Thank you all so much for being here with us, and I'll hand it over to you, Jim.
Okay, thank you very much. Welcome, everybody. My name is Jim, and I'm going to start you guys off with talking a little bit about the diurnal birds of Connecticut. When you look at the diurnal birds of Connecticut, this is what actually got me caught and stuck really on part of my path. When I was volunteering at the Nature Center as a kid, shortly after I started there, one of the things I was doing was wildlife rehabilitation. And I took care of an injured red-tailed hawk for about a month period of time. Bird came in severely emaciated or thin. We fed it, we gave it lots of fluids, and I had the lucky fortune of taking it outside upon release and tossing it up in the air and watching it fly across the field and up into a tree, landed in the tree, and it turned and started calling. And ever since that day, I have been absolutely hooked on birds of prey. Seeing this red-tailed hawk take flight and go across the field, I've become a birder and bird of prey nut ever since. So I'm going to lead you guys on the beginning of this today. When you look at the diurnal birds of prey, you can see that in the picture here that we're looking at hawks and falcons primarily, as well as eagles and osprey. In the picture here, you can see the hawks are broken into two groups: the bootios on the right-hand side of the photograph are the silhouettes, and in the center of the silhouettes are the accipiters. Those are our bird-eating hawks. And then on the left-hand side, you can see the falcons. And as you look at them, you can see that they each have their own set of unique structures, such as wing shape. When you look at the bootios, they have these big, wide wings, and they have these big, wide tails for gliding purposes. And when you look at the accipiters in the middle, they have a little bit shorter, stubbier wings and a longer, more squared tail to help them steer a little bit more. Then you look at the falcons with those real pointy wings and a real long tail. Those are like the bullets of the sky. And we're going to get into each of those individually here as we go through this. But with the birds of prey, with the diurnal birds of prey, the main things for them is their eyesight and their flight. Those are their two most important characteristics when it comes to hunting and catching their prey. For them, it's not much about sound, because during the day, there are so many other sounds out there that isn't a primary focus for them. Being able to see their prey, being able to fly at high speeds, or being able to steer through the forest, those are the key features for diurnal birds of prey and being able to catch their predators, or their prey rather. They're going to be eating birds, mammals, fish, reptiles, amphibians, insects, and even carrion. Some of them are a little bit lazier and don't like to do as much hunting, if you will, and they'll just wait for a dead deer to sort of float by in some ice pack or something if need be. When we look at the first group, the accipiters, these guys are incredibly agile. When you look at these guys have long tails. As you're hiking up the Appalachian Trail, especially in the more forested areas, if you're up in the Maine area, Vermont, New Hampshire portion of the trail, very good chance you're going to come across this guy that you actually see here in the beginning of the video, the goshawk. This guy is going to be a bullet through the trees in just an absolute flash through the woods. Very, very large hawk, is about the size of a red-tailed hawk, but incredibly fast, really long tail, and they're incredibly agile. As you watch this bird, as I continue to talk a little bit here, you can see that this bird has just an amazing ability to fit through very tight spaces. There it is at full speed. Let's slow it down here a little bit so you can see. We're going to slow it down a little bit more here. And you can see that as he's going through this hole, right before he gets to the hole, his eyes are able to adjust, and he knows exactly when to fold those wings in and fold those legs in to make it through the hole without any problems. And as soon as he gets through that hole, boom, he starts flapping again. It's no different than them flying between trees. They need to have that. If you watch the head, that head does not move. Those eyes are 100% focused on that prey, and that prey is not going to stand a chance. And as we look at this, we're going to make some more adjustments here. We're going to put a slightly different scope on this hole, make it a little more narrow, and notice how he hunkers his body real tight. He even uses his feet to force himself through this hole to help give him a little push, and right through and open those wings again, and off he goes. When they're going through these trees, they literally are able to make these adjustments so incredibly fast in their minds. It's second nature for them. Here he goes through the vertical slit, and you can see now he's going to extend the wings lengthwise along his body so that he's going to slide through, put the legs out first so that he becomes elongate, because the hole is easier to get through that way. The really impressive one is this one here. Here's where he's going through probably a hedge, real thick bushes, and you can actually see where he's going to use his legs to push off and get all the way out of that tube. I mean, he has everything folded in as tight as possible, and boom, out come those wings again, and off he goes. And again, the head does not move. Those eyes in that head are 100% focused on that prey, and that prey is not going to stand much of a chance. This is the exact same system that all of our accipiters are going to use, be it the sharp-shinned hawk, be it the Cooper's hawk, or be it the goshawk. As you're going up and down the AT, if you're up in the far northern parts, goshawk is going to be pretty common, especially in the evergreen forests. As you get down towards Connecticut, Cooper's hawk and sharp-shinned hawk are going to be smaller, and they're going to start to show up a lot more commonly. And as you go farther south into the AT, the Cooper's hawk and even the sharp-shinned hawk are going to really dominate. The goshawk is really a northern hawk. When we get to the next group of hawks here, now we're going to look at the bootios. These are the red tails. A lot of us have driven along the highways and you see these hawks that are standing on the lights, or you see the hawks that are gliding and soaring in the fields. These are the bootios. This is a red-tailed hawk, for instance, and you can see how this guy just literally almost no effort. He's got two little flaps here, and he is just using the wind and those really broad wings and that really broad tail to really use what's called Bernoulli's principle, which we're going to get into in a minute, which is the principle of lift. And if you look, he's moving almost nothing, just slight little movements of the individual feathers to change how that air is going over the wing. And that alone is going to give him everything he needs in order to be able to lift and fly and not use any energy. So the accipiters are going through the trees really fast and flapping using a lot of energy. The bootios are lazy. They're just gliding and gliding and gliding. They're going to be looking for mammals in the open fields. So on the AT, when you're in an open meadow area, you're going to look more for the bootios. When you're in the wooded area, you're going to look more for the accipiters. When we get into the falcons, these guys, especially the peregrine, when you get way up to Maine, there is a really, really good chance you're going to find peregrine. There are several breeding pairs of peregrines up in the northern parts of the AT along Maine and Vermont, New Hampshire. You get some really good rocky outcrops on hillsides and on mountains. These guys are absolute bullets in the air. These guys are able to take this idea that I mentioned before, Bernoulli's principle, and they're able to maximize on Bernoulli's principle. This is a bird that is going to use air to its benefit. And when we look at it, you can take something and throw it, drop it from the air, and as that falls, it's going to fall at a certain speed or velocity. And it's not going to be able to go over a certain velocity called terminal velocity. The peregrine falcon can do something that nothing else can, and that can break terminal velocity. And as you watch this here real quick, you can see the peregrine is an absolute amazing hunting. That silhouette you see right there, that's an absolute bullet to the sky. This guy is going to dive, and when he dives, not only does he fold those wings in real tight to his body, he folds his legs in real tight to his body, but he also has other really cool special adaptations. When you look at the eyes, they've got this special eyelid called a nictitating membrane that's going to act like a windshield wiper, and that's going to keep that eye clean so that if a bug hits it, it's going to be able to wipe that off so that it can still see. Like when a bug hits your windshield, you need to be able to see through the windshield. This is Bernoulli's principle. You can see the feathers are folding up on the backs of the wings. There's the bullet-like structure of the peregrine when they're in a nosedive. When they're in that nosedive, they are hitting speeds of over 200 miles an hour. They're going faster than a race car. And when they get to that point, they actually are able to turn themselves upside down, get even more air pushing on them, and they're able to go faster than the typical race car can on a racetrack. These are just incredible speeds. And what this guy's going to do, your accipiter is going to fly through the trees and catch the bird. The bootios is going to fly through the air and land on the ground and catch the male. The peregrine is going to fly through the air, but because he's flying so fast, he's not going to try to grab a hold of that pigeon. Because if he tries to grab that pigeon, he's moving so fast and the pigeon's moving so slow that he's actually going to potentially rip his legs right off his body. So what he's going to do is he's going to fold those feet, really long toes, into a fist, and he's going to punch. Now, I have an example here. Here's a great Hoyt owlfoot. When you look at this great Hoyt owlfoot, you can see you got some really long toes and you got some really nice talons there. Now, this is actually pretty small compared to a peregrine. This is designed for gripping and power, as opposed to a peregrine that has really long toes like this. And those toes then get folded into a fist, and he's going to punch his prey. So that as he swoops past it, he punches it at 200 miles an hour or so, gives it a big concussion, flies around and catches it, and then has his food. So the peregrine is going to be using the speed to go as fast as he can. We're going to look real quick here at this idea of, like I mentioned, of Bernoulli's principle. And Bernoulli's principle is this idea that if I have my wing here like this, as air is going over the top of my wing here, it's moving at one speed. And the air moving under my wing here is moving at a different speed. And what happens is air moves fast over here. So as a result, it's going to reduce pressure. So I have less force pushing here and I have more force pushing here. So what's going to happen? My hand is going to get pushed up in the air. So as a bird is flying, what they're going to do is they're going to move their feathers in such a way so that air goes over the top of the feather faster and gives it lift. Here's an example. Here's a lab that you can do with your kids. And you can take a soda bottle, cut it in half, like you can see here with a little plastic bottle, and you're going to put a ping pong ball in it. And when you put the ping pong ball in it, you're going to be able to demonstrate how Bernoulli's principle works, because what it's going to do is you're going to use a hairdryer And you can see right there, the hairdryer is going to blow the ping pong ball. But if I put the hairdryer at the end of the soda bottle like this, and I put the bottle in there, or the ping pong ball in there, and I turn it on, that ping pong ball is not going to fly out. The air is going around each side of the ping pong ball, and because it's going fast on the top of the bottom, you've got low pressure. And that low pressure is going to force that ball into the container rather than pushing it out. So that's what Bernoulli's principle is. By putting less pressure here, you're going to end up forcing that air back on itself and pushing that ping pong ball into the container. That's how planes work. That's how birds' wings work. And so Bernoulli's principle is a really cool thing. And that's the way that all of our birds are able to fly. One of the other great things with Bernoulli's principle is you can look at it another way, and you can see how, in this case, Bernoulli's principle is used in a slightly different way. It's the same exact principle, but we can see here that what we're looking at is we're looking at this idea of here are two balloons, and if I take those two balloons and I tie them in such a way where they're tied from a doorstop, because the strings are equal length, you hang them from the door frame so that they're the same length down, and they're about 6 inches apart or so. And you can see how he has them nice and level. 3 inches apart, not 6 inches. If I then take a straw and I blow between them, you're going to see exactly what happens. The air going between the balloons is going to create less pressure between the balloons, and the pressure outside of the balloons is going to push the balloons together, which you're going to see here in just a second. This is how Bernoulli's principle works. And it works no matter which side of the balloon you push on. So here you're you're blowing in the middle, reducing the pressure, and the balloons come together. If you blow on the outside of the balloons are going to move the opposite direction. So Bernoulli's principle is this idea that the faster the air moves, the lower the pressure, and the more lift the bird's going to get. Now, there's one more group we got to look at here. You got the eagles. These guys are these big, massive, and we only have one really in the eastern United States. That's the bald eagle. And the bald eagle is coming back. We've seen a lot more of them along the Appalachian Trail. There's a pair that we know of nesting on the Connecticut portion of the Appalachian Trail. They are going to be eating our fish, and they're also the really lazy ones I mentioned before. They're going to be eating dead deer. They're going to be eating carrion. And then you have the osprey. And the osprey are strictly our fish eaters. And the cool thing about the osprey is that the osprey have these really special feet. They don't have anything special about their flying ability. They really don't have anything special about their eyesight. But with osprey, they have these really cool special feet. And these special feet allow them, they can actually move one of their toes so that when they catch a fish, they automatically have the ability to turn the fish so it's facing head first. When that fish is facing head first, less wind is going to push against that fish, so he's going to be able to fly without any problems. If the fish is facing this way and the bird is trying to fly, that's a lot of air that's blocking it to make it hard for that osprey to fly. Plus, if you look at the bottom of these feet, there's all these little spikes on the bottom of those toes. And those are like little special grips so that they can hold on to slimy things like eels. So osprey have a very special foot. Everybody else has really cool adaptations. Here's an example of a bald eagle that was I photographed just the other day here in Connecticut. And this one was sitting very nicely for me, and then all of a sudden decided it was time to go. And you can actually see down at the bottom, you can see his nice big feet and those big, huge talons. I know Matt's going to get a little bit more into talons when he talks about the owls here in a minute. But one of the cool things that we can see along the Appalachian Trail is over the last 50 years or so, we have had this amazing opportunity to see an amazing comeback of all of our birds of prey. Over the last 50 years, we have seen people become incredibly caring about the environment and do a lot of good work about cleaning up pollution and cleaning up things like pesticides and other things. And in doing so, we've seen an incredible increase in the population of our diurnal birds of prey. Things like peregrine falcons, things like osprey, things like bald eagles. We're seeing numbers of those like we've never, ever seen before. And as a result, when you're hiking on the Appalachian Trail, there's a much greater chance now that you're going to see one of these types of birds of prey along the AT. And they're now common along the AT. There's at least actually 3 pairs of eagles within hunting distance of the AT here in Connecticut. There are osprey living right along the Connecticut portion of the AT, as well as other portions of the AT. So it's awesome that we've gotten this ability to clean up and help protect the environment, and a lot of it's come from the people who are protecting the AT, because you're protecting this for an open space and you're protecting it for the nature for people to enjoy, but also helping people to realize how important nature is. And by doing that, we're cleaning up and helping to protect all these other species.
Thank you so much, Jim. These videos were fantastic.
Thank you.
Matt, over to you.
All righty, let's get going. So Jim broke down the diurnal birds of prey very, very nicely, and I'm going to help you understand the adaptations of nocturnal birds. Now, you can imagine these birds as being apex level predators. And when we talk apex level predators, where you kind of have to imagine the top of the pyramid. I don't like to discuss food chains as chains because that's not really realistic. They're more food webs. They're much more complex than just a simple chain. But a food pyramid gives us a good idea about an apex level predator. The very, very top of the food chain has less and less and less biomass or energy that's available. So it supports less and less and less of those predators. In order to sit on top of the throne, so to speak, you have to be armed with a whole lot of weapons. And birds of prey in general have those weapons. They have these amazing adaptations. They hunt, they're quick, they're silent, they grab onto things, they're armed with talons, they're armed with sharp beaks. They have all these amazing adaptations. Now imagine doing it at night. Owls happen to be one of my favorite groups of animals in the entire world. Here you see a snowy owl. And this snowy owl was actually photographed and filmed at Long Beach here in Connecticut last weekend. And I brought my son down, who's 11 years old, and he literally basically battled with me to push me out of the way so he could look at this bird for almost an hour in pretty much complete silence. After about 40 minutes, he started to ask questions like, why is an owl out during the day? How big are his talons? How much does he weigh? When people typically see an owl for the first time, it's a memory that they have for the rest of their life. It oftentimes, in the birding world, so to speak, is the animal that captures the imagination and draws people in for basically a lifelong passion of searching these animals out. So our nocturnal birds of prey, they range in size from about 6.5 inches all the way up to about 2 feet. This is probably going to be your more common bird of prey along the Appalachian Trail. This is called a barred owl, not a barn owl with an N, but a barred owl because of the bars that run across his chest. And this barred owl is also known as a marsh owl because it loves to hunt frogs. This is a wetland specialist, and we're going to talk about why this bird was out during the day. If you notice, his eyes aren't the same color as most owls. We think about owls' eyes as being bright yellow, and this bird has almost a dark brown color to his eyes. They don't see quite the same way, and this bird is what we would refer to as crepuscular. This is an animal that's out right as the sun sets and right before the sun rises, but in the deepest, darkest of nights, this guy's probably going to be asleep, much like during the day. In this case, it was a cloudy day, so this animal probably mistook the time of day and came out for hunting. So right now on the East Coast, if everybody looks out their window, you guys can see this is the time that barred owls are going to start to become active. Now, everybody thinks of owls as being these treetop hunters, and they're really not. They're very, very, very slow flyers by comparison to the falcons and the hawks. And unfortunately, they do get picked off by other birds of prey. They like to sit very low in the canopy. So this bird was filmed only about 8 feet off the ground. They're going to go from about 8 feet up to about 20 feet, and that's going to be pretty much it. They're not going to sit as a silhouette on the very, very tops of the trees. Every now and then we see a great horned owl doing that, but very rarely do you see any other owls doing it. So large or small, these top-level predators are armed with the most amazing adaptations, enabling them to sit on top of the heap. But you can see here we do have a variety. We have barn owls, we have northern saw-whet owls. Unfortunately, because they're apex predators, they're very rare. And because they like to hide from us with their cryptic colorations, they're not oftentimes seen. Now here's a good comparison of size. Probably the most common type owl along the Appalachian Trail is going to be the eastern screech owl. And this is going to be an animal that specializes in the fringe habitats or the edge habitats. It's not an animal that likes the deep, dark forest. It's not an animal that likes continuous forest. This is the animal that you're most likely going to see, or more specifically here, at your campsites along the Appalachian Trail. So imagine you're sitting in your tent. It's, let's say, just getting dark, so 7 o'clock at night along the AT. It's when most people go to sleep because you've been walking all day. And all of a sudden you're sitting around your campfire and you hear this. It is a eerie sound, and it causes the hairs on the back of your neck to sit straight up. Although very, very tiny, they are armed with a whole lot of amazing characteristics. The barred owl sounds a little bit different. You can see the difference right away. The barred owl has that rounded head, kind of like mine. Does not have feather tufts. These are not ears. We're going to talk about this in just a second. So slightly different, and makes a very, very, very different sound. This is a bird that you will oftentimes hear off in the distance, but very rarely will you see unless you're incredibly lucky. Now, so far, the myth about owls hooting, I think we've disproven. Then our last one, the largest owl that we have here in Connecticut is called the great horned owl. Now, I say that it's the largest owl. It is probably the heaviest of the owls. Snowy owls are slightly bigger, but because they only come to us at certain times a year, we don't usually consider them to be a resident of the state. Now, this is the one that people oftentimes hear in the movies and on TV shows. As we finish up with the sounds, I want everybody to take a close look at the colorations on all three of these species' bodies. They do not have a singular color. They are very mottled. They blend into their background, and they are amazingly cryptic. They will sit in a tree above you and you will never know they're there. They'll sit in the crook of a tree or in the cavity of a tree, close their eyes, and unless they move or make sound, very rarely do people spot them. So let's talk a little bit about their adaptations. Specifically, we're going to start with flight. I know Jim covered a lot on flight, but owls have a very, very specific adaptation to their flight that makes them very unique. Okay, most birds of prey have solid edged wingtip or solid edged feathers, all right? Meaning that their feathers are closed. Owls, on the other hand, have serrated edges. Now, to demonstrate how this works, what I want everybody to do is I want you to put your hands up. I want you to keep your fingers absolutely closed, okay? Now, with just your fingertips, all I want you to do is clap. Okay, everybody stop. Now, you probably can't hear my fingers clapping, or if you can, I'm going to press the microphone on the computer. But you get the idea is we make quite a bit of noise. Now, as an example of this, I want everybody to open your fingers up. With just your fingertips, I want you to do the same thing. Hear the difference? Owls' feathers are like this. When they fly, they are completely silent. Now, another adaptations owls have is that their bodies, even though they do look big, are really made up entirely of down feathers. Those feathers are designed to muffle any sounds as they go through the trees. These animals are so silent that I've been on nighttime walks with people, and I've watched great horned owls fly down over the top of them within probably 6 feet, and people never even know they were there. It's amazing how cryptic they are. So imagine a bird that can't be seen because they're well camouflaged and can't be heard. Two adaptations that so far are going to make them unbelievable. Now, here is an example of the serrated edge. You can see it in this picture. And down below, they actually overlaid another feather so that you could get an idea of what a diurnal bird of prey feather looks like. Now, let's talk a little bit about hearing. If you look at the great horned owl, what I want you to notice is I want you to take a look at the shape of their face. Owls' faces are completely flattened. A lot of people think that the feather tufts up top are actually their ears, and they're not. Because if that was the case, the barred owl would be completely deaf. Okay, that's not the case at all. This owl here has these feather tufts, and they'll stick them up in order to communicate. One, they use it to blend into their surroundings. Two, and you can see here, there's actually two feathers there. He's actually kind of got a weird hairdo going on. Their ear holes are actually located right along this black line on their face. There's one ear hole right here up by the top of their head, and one ear hole down here on the further down on their beak. Now, the reason they have these offset ears is very, very important to how they hunt. And I'm going to demonstrate this by clicking onto our next slide here. If you've ever watched an owl, and I've had the privilege of raising a few owls over the years, oftentimes when you do see an owl out in the wild and your feet are moving, and all of a sudden you see the owl start to move very, very peculiarly. So here's a good video of an owl utilizing his hearing in a very unique way. A lot of people think that they're dancing. Kind of looks like that. They're kind of jamming out, but it's not true at all. What this owl is actually doing is this owl is actually flexing those ear holes. And those ear holes are rather large. They're about the same size as their eyeballs. And what it's doing is it's actually changing the size of the ear holes and then moving its head simultaneously. And as it does that, it can actually triangulate where a sound is coming from. For you and I, when a sound comes in, we can tell horizontally where it's coming from the right or from the left, but we can't tell whether it's above or below us oftentimes. This owl here can actually pinpoint in space three-dimensionally where a sound is coming from. So imagine you're a mouse up on a branch. This animal can not only hide from you very well, it can fly up almost silently. It can pinpoint exactly how high above the ground you are and where you are in space. And then to top it all off, it's got incredible eyesight. Now, imagine an owl's ears. They estimate an owl can hear a mouse cracking seeds from about a football field's distance away. So right away, you can imagine how good their hearing is. They estimate it's probably between 8 to 10 times better than human beings. Hearing, cryptic coloring, silent feathers, now we get to eyes. And the eyes are incredibly, incredibly important to an owl. The eyes are huge. If everybody can show me, how big do you think your eyes would be if you were an owl? How big would they be? Everybody got an idea? Of course, I can't see everybody. That's about the size. They'd be the size of apples, maybe oranges. And of course, on a day like today, it would be incredibly bright. So, imagine, here's this bird. All right, we'll just put that back. I don't want to make too much of a fool of myself. But you can imagine this eyesight. Now, this eyesight is so good, and their eyes are so big that they can actually pick up more light than human beings can. The human eye sits very, very far in our skull, sits way out, and it protrudes. And we have a whole lot of cones in our eyes. And the cones in our eyes are actually designed to pick up on detail and color, not something an owl needs when it's hunting at night. What it does need, it needs its ability to pick up movement and to see in very low amounts of light. So this owl has very, very deep set eyes. It goes almost all the way back to the back of its skull. They say that if you move those feathers around the ear disc, that you can actually see the eyeballs, which is really kind of creepy. But it has those deep eyes because all the way along, those deep eyes are going to be rods. And those rods pick up on light, a huge amount of light, allowing them to see in almost complete blackness. Now, the owl itself probably has eyesight that's about 5 to 7 times better than human beings. Give you a demonstration. If an owl could read, everybody can probably see that. You're about 8 inches away. Imagine if I were to take this and I ran down the street and I were to hold it up again. What page am I on? We can't see that well. But an owl, they estimate, can see a mouse from about 300 feet away with one birthday candle next to it. So incredible eyesight, incredibly hearing, incredibly silent, and well-colored. These guys sit on the very top of the food chain. Now, in this slide, I want you to notice this slight little white membrane coming down over his eyes. Owls have the unique ability that they have a second set of eyelids. This is what's called the nictitating membrane. And imagine a bird. Remember that Jim showed you the video of the goshawk flying through and had that tunnel vision on its prey. As you're flying through the forest, which these owls unfortunately do, there's a lot of bugs, there's a lot of branches, there's a lot of dust, there's a lot of things flying around, and they do get things in their eyes. The problem is they have tunnel vision. They got one shot in most nights to get their prey. And they fly down, and because all those things get in their eyes, they have to have a way to keep their eyes clean. This nictitating membrane actually slides down over their eyes in a diagonal fashion, and it actually acts like a windshield wiper and washes all of the bugs out of their eyes so they can keep their eyes open as they fly. In other words, they can fly through the trees without ever blinking. Truly blinking, I should say. So here's a demonstration with owls. Now, owls have their eyes on the front of their face, okay? Human beings have this great ability to move their eyes. If everybody holds your head absolutely still, I want you just with your head, hold your chin absolutely still. I want you to just your eyes look up, look down, look left, look right. You can do that because your eyes have the ability to rotate inside the sockets, okay? That allows us to have a greater peripheral vision. We also have 7 bones in our neck, which means that we can turn our head all the way to the right or all the way to the left, about 180 degrees, and our eyes actually move further in either direction to pick up on movement. Now, we know our peripheral sight isn't as good as the binocular vision right in front of us. However, it does allow us to pick up on movement and certain colors that actually keeps us safe. Owls, on the other hand, their eyes are fixed. Their eyes don't move inside the sockets. Now imagine, if this owl were to move his eyes to look up, look down, look left, and look right, the moment he looks down, there goes his eyes, okay? Their eyes are so deep set in their head that they can't move them. Their eyes act like headlights on a car. That means wherever the owl's face is pointing, and their faces are flat just like my hand, wherever their head is pointed, that's where they're listening, and it's also where they're seeing. Now, in order to compensate for that lack of peripheral vision, owls have more bones in their neck than human beings do. Here we can see the human being has 7 vertebrae. Owls actually have 14. Depending on the species, it varies a little. But if you have 14 bones in the neck, you can move your neck a whole lot further than a human being can. There's this great old wives' tale that the owls can turn their head all the way around. Not true at all. They have a backbone just like you and I do. If they were to turn their head all the way around, their head would pop off. Okay? So that doesn't happen. However, you can imagine a bird that can turn its head 270 degrees because of that lack of movement of the eye. So a bird can literally be looking over their shoulder, almost pointing their eyesight directly behind them. And in a moment's notice, you blink just a little, that bird spins its head all the way back around the other side. Remember, you're the predators in the forest. You're the scary monsters out there. This bird wants to keep their eyes on you at all times. Now, lastly, we got strength. All right, and Jim talked a bit about the talons. And this is actually a peregrine falcon that you can see its talons and how long they are. And Jim brought up the owlfoot. This is actually from a great horned owl. Okay, now you can imagine a bird flying in. All right, they're silent. You can't see them coming. They can see you from a football field's distance away. They heard you rummage around in the leaves. They know exactly where you are, and they know exactly how high above the ground you are. And they fly in, and they grab you. Now, if everybody links their fingers together, just like this, on the count of 3, we're all going to squeeze as hard as we can. Ready? 1, 2, 3, squeeze. Okay? And look down at your knuckles. You probably see some of the blood getting squished out. Everybody stop. Wiggle your fingers out. Don't want to hurt anybody. If we were to actually grab onto something, the average human adult can exert about 120 pounds of pressure. As you get older, that drops a little bit. As you're younger, it drops a little bit. But, on average, we're at about 100 to 120 pounds of pressure. A great horned owl, when they grab on with one talon or one foot, they're exerting 500 to 525 pounds of pressure. Armed with inch-long razor-sharp talons, that bird comes in, grabs on, crushes those talons back. The tendons in his foot actually get locked into position, and on top of it, they have bone-crushing power. A great horned owl that weighs 6 pounds can pick up and fly away with something that weighs 18 pounds. They pick up things like skunks. They pick up things like raccoons. They pick up things like fox, possums, and unfortunately, every now and then, a dog or a cat that's been let out in the backyard. Okay, let's face it, these guys are looking for wide open spaces, and they're opportunistic. They are the top of the top as far as predators go. And when they grab onto something, they're not letting go. Now, an owl, because it eats such a large amount of prey or large pieces, have incredibly strong back muscles. It uses those talons to hold down, grab on with a beak, and pull back. It rips large chunks off. It does not have the ability to cut up its food with a fork and knife, so therefore, the owl has to eat everything. It eats the bones, it eats the fur, it eats the feathers, it eats the nails, it eats everything. A lot of that is undigestible. And it swallows it down into a portion of its throat called a crop. And in that crop, it's actually going, or in the gizzard, it's actually going to grind up this food. It's going to absorb the things that it can actually utilize, and it's going to store things that it can't utilize. It doesn't dissolve bones like a reptile does or anything along those lines, doesn't dissolve the fur. So it would get clogged, okay? It would fill up way too quick. So what an owl does is an owl actually uses muscles in its neck to squeeze all those things together, and twice a day, it creates an owl pellet. Now, an owl pellet, a lot of people think they kind of look like poop, and it kind of looks like poop. It's not at all, okay? It didn't actually go through the digestive tract at all. It ended up in its throat, and twice a day, you'll see an owl kind of moving its head around, and it opens up its mouth, and it almost looks like owl puke. A lot of kids that I teach will say, ew, owl puke. But it's dry, okay? And if we open it up, I'll do my best here so you guys can see it. You can see inside of it, you see those white pieces? You see that little orange piece? That's actually the teeth to a rodent. This is actually the skull, the backbones, the nails, everything that the owl ate overnight, and it coughs it up. And this actually turns out to be one of the easiest ways for us to find where these birds actually are. They don't like us. They're going to get out of Dodge as quickly as possible when we come up. Because they're silent, very rarely will we see them unless we spook them, okay? But if you come up underneath a stand of pines, and you can see here on the left, there's an owl pellet. It doesn't quite look like the one I have, because mine are put through an autoclave to keep them safe for kids. But this one probably is a week and a half old, and it was actually found under a barn owl roost here in Connecticut, right down the street from me. Now, if I didn't know this bird was here, I would never know this bird's here, okay? It is so well hidden and so cryptic, it's unbelievable. But I know it's here because as I look down on the ground, I see the pellets, I see the collection of bones from old pellets, and you also see a huge amount of what's called whitewash. And whitewash is obviously where a bird will defecate on the ground to reduce its weight also. But because they find the specific site or the perfect site for them to roost, they will stick with that site until it actually either falls down as a tree or until it's compromised by human interaction. So I do my best not to go in to see these birds all that often. I might go in once or twice a year just to make sure that they're still there. That's about it. All right, so here we've got birds, okay? They're quiet, silent in the case of owls. They've got enormous eyes that they can see you with. They've got incredible ability to hear you, and they're armed with razor sharp talons. I don't know about you guys, but to me, this bird sits on the very, very top. And unfortunately, there's one species that sits even higher than it, and that's human beings. Owls and birds of prey, unfortunately, worldwide are on the decline to some degree. Okay, we've made great strides in areas that we've protected, such as along the Appalachian Trail. But unfortunately, as we destroy open spaces where these animals like to hunt, there's less and less and less food for them. So we know what the outcome will be if we don't start to protect them. I want to thank everybody for coming and checking this out. Hope you learned a lot. I'll be happy to answer whatever questions you have, if there are any.
Are all owls nocturnal? And is it normal for them to hang out in one spot for many hours?
They will stay in one spot for many hours if they feel safe. So oftentimes people will find them in their backyards on a particular branch. And as long as no other birds see them and mob them, they will sit there until the nighttime comes and they feel safe to move out. No, not all owls are nocturnal. The ones that kind of specialize that usually amaze people are things like the snowy owls and the short-eared owls. They are oftentimes seen in bright daylight flying around. People oftentimes, when you see them, because they are rare, will sit there just in awe, as my son did. A bright white bird sitting on the beach doesn't make much sense. I see that Jenny just typed in, how do you find an owl on the beach? Well, unfortunately or fortunately, these birds are, 2.5 feet tall. So when they fly by, right away it's not a gull. And they oftentimes will sit out on the jetties because it's an open spot and they love to hunt ducks. So right near shore is actually kind of the perfect spot. An area that has a mixture of wetlands, such as marshes, and jetties is the perfect spot to find them. And if you know where to look, they oftentimes have cyclical migrations. So here in Connecticut, we know that they come to two very specific spots pretty much every year. There's also another spot, Logan Airport, where they have long-term studies on snowy owls because every single year these animals come down to that specific spot. So large open areas where they don't have to expend a whole lot of energy and they're protected is the perfect spot to go look for the snowy owls. Just keeping in mind, it's going to be really, really, really cold. They live in areas that have lots of wind, and they're Arctic animals, so they're a little bit better equipped than we are.
I did see a question in the chat regarding owls attacking. Could be one of two things. Number one, some birds of prey are very aggressive about their nesting territories. Goshawks, for instance, are very, very territorial. I have actually been chased down by a goshawk when I've been in their territory during nesting season. And the bird knew well enough to not only chase me and watch me and my buddy jump to the ground, but he flew past us. A third friend of ours ran and hid behind a tree. He flew past the tree, turned around, and came right back at the person. Sort of like, yeah, you're going to hide by the tree. I'm going to come get you anyways. So it could be a territorial thing because of nesting, but also, unfortunately, sometimes people will find young birds and will raise them thinking that they're injured or they're orphaned. And during the time of being raised, they imprint. And then when the bird is old enough, they release the bird, and the bird is now an adult living in the wild, but has imprinted. We had a great horned owl come to the nature center that I used to work at because it was attacking, in quotes, women with long blonde hair. And it turned out that a lady raised this great horned owl from a baby who had long blonde hair. So when she released it, this male great horned owl thought its partner had long blonde hair, so it went after anybody with long blonde hair, thinking that was its mate, and that's who he was supposed to be mating with. And so they caught this owl and they brought it to our nature center, and we had this owl in captivity for most of its life. It unfortunately escaped from us, and 2 weeks after it escaped from us, we got reports of it attacking people with long blonde hair in a park in the town where our nature center was. So it could be imprinting. It could be either imprinting or it could be just a territorial individual.
Well, thank you once again to Jim and Matt. We really appreciate this really amazing, engaging, fascinating session today. Just as a reminder that the Appalachian Trail Conservancy is a nonprofit. For nearly 100 years, people from all over the world of all ages and backgrounds have helped to keep the dream of the Appalachian Trail a reality. So if you do love the trail and want to protect, manage, advocate for it, consider becoming a steward yourself by joining us at AppalachianTrail.org. Our next session, we will be in Massachusetts. We're learning about permaculture and nature as a model for farming. We look forward to seeing you then, everyone. Until then, take care.